The sun had barely risen when I found the message. 5 words, glowing on my husband's phone screen like a siren. I missed last night already. I stared at the name above it, my blood thickening to tar. Celia, my sister, my best friend, my childhood, secret keeper, the person who once held my hair back as I sobbed through heartbreaks. I stood in the kitchen, bare feet freezing on the tiled floor, phone trembling in my hand like it carried poison. I could hear the shower running upstairs. Jason, my husband, the man I had built my life with for 6 years, the man who I thought still loved me. I couldn't feel the tears at first. My throat closed. My eyes stayed dry. I just kept reading the message over and over like it would change if I looked long enough. But it didn't. A few more taps, and I found them all. Texts that traced their way back weeks. Pictures, plans, desires they didn't bother to hide anymore. She had sent him a photo from our beach trip last month. The one where she was wearing my bikini because she forgot hers. He replied with a string of emojis and compliments that made my skin crawl. My stomach turned to acid. I didn't confront him that morning. I didn't scream or shatter plates or even cry. I took a deep breath, placed the phone gently on the counter like a sleeping baby, and walked out of the house with a stillness that felt foreign. I drove to the lake, the one where Celia and I used to paddleboard when we were kids, and I sat on the shore until my knees ached and the sky turned gray. I remembered her laugh echoing off the water, her long hair braided down her back, the way she used to tug me into the cold and yell, "Come on, don't be afraid." She had always been the louder one, the brighter one, the one who sparkled while I stood in her shadow. But I never minded. I thought her light was something we shared, something we both owned. I never realized she'd use it to blind me. That night when I came home, I found him on the couch, scrolling his phone like it was any other day. I kissed his cheek, told him I loved him, and smiled when he looked surprised. I made him dinner. I laughed at his jokes. I lay beside him in bed like a woman whose world hadn't been split in half. And every night after that, I did the same. For 3 more months, I lived like nothing had changed. I kissed him good morning. I called Celia, invited her over, hugged her tightly when she arrived, and poured her wine. I watched them carefully, pretending I was too stupid to notice their glances, their twitchy laughter, the way they always lingered too long in the same room. I recorded it all in my head, every smirk, every slip, every secret that thought it could stay hidden. I waited. I listened. I planned. The day I filed for divorce, Jason cried like a child. His face collapsed into his hands, and he begged me to stay, saying he didn't know what came over him, saying it was just a mistake. I handed him the envelope and walked away. I didn't tell him I knew. Not yet. I didn't give him that relief. Celia called 3 hours later. She pretended she was shocked. Her voice cracked. She said she'd always been afraid he was wrong for me. I told her I needed space. I told her I forgave her. She said she loved me. I said, I know. For a year, I rebuilt my life. Quietly, patiently, I moved to a new city, got a new job, dyed my hair, threw away everything that reminded me of them. I started therapy. I started running. I started breathing again. And eventually, I started dating. His name was Luca. He was kind, slow-spoken, with eyes that saw too much but never judged. He asked me questions I didn't know how to answer. He listened to silences like they were music. He never touched his phone when we were together. When he kissed me, I didn't flinch. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. It wasn't a flash mob or a plane banner or a ring in a champagne glass. He just looked at me across the breakfast table one rainy morning and said, "Let's do forever." And I said yes. I didn't think twice. When we started planning the wedding, People asked who my maid of honor would be. I smiled. I said I had the perfect person in mind. Luca didn't know the whole story, not yet. But when I told him I wanted my sister to stand beside me on our wedding day, he paused. "Are you sure?" he asked gently, brows pinched. She didn't. I kissed him softly and said, "It's okay. It's time." I sent Celia the invitation by hand, a lavender envelope with a gold seal, her name written in calligraphy. Inside was a card. "Will you be my maid of honor?" No explanation, no mention of the past, just a question that hung in the air like a challenge. She texted me the next day. "Are you serious?" I replied, "Deadly." She said yes. Of course she did. The first time I saw her after the invitation was at a cafe we used to love, a quaint little place filled with sun and ivy and the smell of burnt espresso. She wore a pale green dress and a lipstick shade I used to lend her in college. For a moment, just a fleeting one, she looked like the sister I remembered, before the wreckage, before the betrayal. But then her eyes met mine, and I saw it. Guilt, buried under layers of practiced charm, and fear, shivering just beneath the surface of her smooth, smug smile. She hugged me tightly, too tightly. Her perfume was the same, orange blossom and something sharp, almost bitter. She whispered into my ear, "Thank you for this. I thought you hated me." I pulled away, gave her a smile as hollow as a cathedral after midnight, and said, "I never hate the people I forgive." She blinked, unsure. "You forgive me?" she asked slowly, like the words were foreign, dangerous. I nodded. "I do. Completely." I watched her shoulders drop, just slightly. She exhaled, relieved. That's when I knew she hadn't changed. She still thought she had won. Over the following months, we planned together. She accompanied me to florist appointments, dress fittings, cake tastings. She smiled like a saint and posed like a sister reborn, helping me hold trains of silk, comb through color swatches, and pick out centerpieces with names like Moondust and Evening Whispers. She was everything a maid of honor should be, devoted, attentive, present, but I could feel the tension behind every gesture. She watched me closely, as if waiting for a moment to drop her guard, to confess, or worse, to be punished. I gave her nothing. That was the punishment. She never spoke of Jason, not once, and neither did I. But the ghost of what she'd done hung between us like fog. Sometimes I caught her looking at me strangely, as though she were trying to see how much I remembered, how much I knew. She never dared ask. Cowards never do. At night, I lay in bed beside Luca, listening to his breathing, letting his steady presence lull the demons in my chest. He was warm in ways I didn't know I needed, thoughtful in ways that made me ache. One evening, a month before the wedding, he found me staring out the window, a glass of red wine untouched in my hand. He walked over, wrapped his arms around my waist, and whispered, "What happened with her?" His voice was velvet. No accusation, no pressure, just a quiet offering of space. I turned to him slowly. I hadn't planned to tell him, but something about the way his eyes held mine made me feel like keeping it inside would only rot me further. So I told him. Every word, the messages, the affair, the silence, the slow, calculated ruin. I told him I knew, long before the divorce, that I never said a word to either of them, that I smiled, nodded, kissed, forgave, while planning the most elegant revenge. When I finished, he didn't speak. He just stared at me with something between awe and heartbreak. "And now?" he asked. "What does making her maid of honor do for you?" I ran a finger around the rim of my glass, watching the red swirl. "It shows her I've won," I said. "It shows her that nothing she did broke me. that I could survive her fire, walk through it, and wear white on the other side. He nodded, slowly. "And are you happy?" I met his gaze. "With you?" "Yes." "With her?" "Not yet." Rehearsal dinner, candlelight and champagne. A perfect stage. I made a toast that evening in front of 50 smiling faces as waiters swept through the hall, with silver trays and laughter hummed through the air. "To love," I said, raising my glass. "To the kind that endures, the kind that forgives, and the kind that never lies." My eyes flicked to Celia, who froze for a fraction of a second before raising her glass too. Her lips moved. "To love," but her hands trembled just enough to make her bracelet chime. The next day we had our final fitting. My dress was an ivory dream. Long sleeves of lace, buttons down the back like pearls on silk. She zipped me up, her hands cold. "You look beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you," I said. "I'm glad you're here." Her dress was soft rose, the color of a sunset in late spring. It hugged her perfectly, modest but elegant. She looked like a woman who had everything under control, but her eyes gave her away. They darted. She hadn't slept. I could tell. Her smile was thinner now, more desperate. 1 week to go. Luca and I had chosen a vineyard in the hills, a place with golden grass and lavender that whispered in the wind. It was peaceful there, removed from the city, the past, the pain. My mother cried when she saw the view. My father clapped Luca on the back and said, "Don't screw this up." Celia watched from the side, always near, always helpful. I noticed the way she touched her necklace when she thought no one was looking, the one Jason gave her. I knew that charm. A tiny star, silver and delicate. He had bought me the same one once, years ago. She probably didn't know I remembered. But I did. I remembered everything. At the bridal shower, someone asked Celia to say a few words about me. She stood, glass in hand, eyes wide and shiny. "My sister is the strongest woman I've ever known," she began. "She has always been generous, even when people didn't deserve it. She forgives more than most, and loves harder than anyone. I know. I'm proud to stand by her on her happiest day." Everyone clapped. I did too. But in her voice, I heard the apology she didn't have the courage to give. And in mine, I gave her absolution without ever using the word. The morning of the wedding arrived cloaked in soft mist, the sky pale and clean, like the earth had taken a breath and held it in reverence. I stood in front of the mirror in the bridal suite, my heart beating slowly, deliberately, not like it. Had on my first wedding day. Back then it had raced, frantic, unsure. But now it moved with certainty, as if it had finally found the rhythm it had been searching for all along. The dress hugged my body like a whisper. Long lace sleeves traced over my skin, the neckline delicate and regal, the train pooling behind, me like a slow-moving wave. My hair was pulled into a low knot, soft strands curling around my ears. I didn't feel like a bride. I felt like a monument, silent, watchful, unshakable. Celia stood behind me, holding my veil, eyes wide with a mix of reverence and something that looked like shame. Her fingers trembled as she adjusted the comb. "You're breathtaking," she said softly, as if afraid the words might shatter. I met her eyes in the mirror. "I feel calm," I replied. She nodded, swallowing, her throat moving like she was trying to keep something down. "You look like a queen," she whispered. I turned slowly to face her. "I am." There was a knock at the door. My mother peeked in with tears already in her eyes. "Everyone's ready," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I took one last look at Celia. Her face had changed since the engagement. Thinner, tired. She looked older than she was. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The vineyard was bathed in gold. The mist had lifted by the time I stepped outside, replaced by sunlight that draped everything in warmth. Rows of wooden chairs sat lined in neat little lanes, facing the white trellis wrapped in ivy and silk. The guests stood as I appeared, the music swelling gently around us. I held my bouquet of wild garden roses and white lilacs tightly, each stepped down the aisle smooth, unwavering. Celia walked ahead of me, petals falling from her hands. She wore the role well, maid of honor, perfect sister, redeemed woman. But I watched her closely. Her shoulders were drawn tight. Her smile was stiff. She avoided my gaze. The air around her vibrated with the tension of a secret held for too long. When I reached Luca, he took my hands, and everything else disappeared. His eyes were full of water and light. He mouthed, "You're safe now," and I believed him. The ceremony began. Vows were read, rings exchanged. Laughter and tears drifted among the vines and blossoms. I said the words, and I meant every single one. This wasn't revenge, not anymore. It was resurrection. I was standing on the other side of fire, and the ash had made me clean. And then came the speeches. The reception was set under a canopy of lights, strung like stars between trees. Crystal glasses clinked, plates clattered. Music hummed in the background like an old friend. When it was Celia's turn, the room quieted. She rose slowly, fingers curled around her champagne flute, her mouth trembling slightly. She didn't read from paper. She just stood, alone, in front of a crowd that watched with warm, expectant eyes. "I've known my sister my whole life," she began. "I've known her as a child who used to rescue injured birds and sneak extra cookies to our dog. I've known her as a teenager who never raised her voice at me, no matter how cruel I was. I've known her as a woman who carries more strength than anyone I've ever met." Her voice wavered, and her hand tightened on the glass. "But today, I think I've seen the most extraordinary version of her. A woman who can love without limits, forgive without demand, and rebuild herself from the wreckage left by people she trusted." A hush settled over the crowd. I felt Luca's hand slip into mine. "I heard her once," Celia said, and the silence fractured. A few heads tilted, confused. Some eyes widened. "Terribly, unforgivably. And I never told her how sorry I am. Not really." Her eyes locked with mine. "But she stood here today and made me her maid of honor anyway. She welcomed me into her most sacred day. That's who she is. That's the kind of grace I can never repay. But I'll spend the rest of my life trying to." She raised her glass. Her hand was shaking so badly the champagne rippled. "To my sister, who is everything I was too selfish to be, and everything I still hope to become." The room burst into applause. I held my glass up too, but I didn't smile. I simply nodded, once. A quiet, unflinching acknowledgement. Later, in the hush between songs and toasts, she found me near the edge of the vineyard, away from the crowd. The moon hung above us, low and orange, heavy with memory. "You knew," she said. Not a question, just an admission. I turned to her. "I knew the moment it happened. I knew by how quiet you became around him, how his phone suddenly had a password, how you both couldn't meet my eyes the same day I asked you to be godparents to the child I thought we were going to have." Her face crumpled. I hated myself every day for it. I nodded. "Good. I didn't know how to fix it. You can't." She stepped forward. "But this, today, you let me be part of it. You made me stand beside you. Why?" I looked at her for a long time. "Because I wanted you to see the life you tried to ruin rise from the ruins. I wanted you to stand in the place where you broke me and witness that I wasn't destroyed. And because somewhere deep down, I think a part of me still loves the girl you were, before you let jealousy eat her alive." Her eyes filled with tears. She didn't dare let fall. "I lost everything," she whispered. "You were the best thing in my life." I nodded again, quietly. "I know." She left early that night, slipped away after the first dance, after the cake, before the sparklers. I didn't stop her. I didn't need to. She had heard everything I wanted her to hear. The sky was ink black by the time the last guests departed. The last laugh faded into the vineyards. The last candle flickered out beneath the canopy of stars. Luca and I stood together in the quiet, his jacket draped over my shoulders, the scent of his cologne anchoring me to the moment like a lifeline. We didn't speak at first, just held hands, swaying in the afterglow of the most beautiful day of my life. But the beauty wasn't in the flowers or the dresses or the vintage wine. It was in the truth, all of it, finally laid bare and survived. I watched the moonlight paint silver across the grapevines, tracing the hills like a gentle hand, and thought about all the versions of myself that had brought me here. The naive girl who believed a love that hid things was still love. The betrayed wife who smiled through heartbreak. The sister who mourned a living woman. The woman who chose not to scream, but to scheme. And still, somehow, I had found peace. The next morning, I woke up beside Luca, wrapped in warm sheets and golden light, and felt no weight in my chest, just breath, just him. He kissed my temple, whispered, "Wife," like it was the first word he'd ever spoken, and I laughed, pressing my face into his neck. There were no ghosts in our room, no shadows. A few days later, a letter arrived. It was handwritten, the envelope soft and wrinkled like it had been held too long before being sent. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. Celia. I sat alone in the garden when I opened it, under a tree that still held the scent of wedding blossoms. My fingers hesitated on the flap, my heart oddly steady. "Dearest A, I wasn't going to write you. I told myself you wouldn't read it. Or worse, you would. But I can't leave things where they were. I saw something on your face that day I hadn't seen in years. Peace. I envy it. I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I know it wasn't about kindness. I know it was about power, about reminding me what I threw away. And you were right to do it. I loved him. Or at least, I thought I did. But it wasn't real love. It was hunger, envy, the sickness that comes from being second best. For so long, you start to chew your own hands just to feel important. You always had everything I wanted. Not money or status or even love, but that stillness, that deep knowing of who you are. I never had that. I still don't. Sleeping with Jason wasn't about him. It was about you. I wanted to become you. And when I couldn't, I tried to break you. But you didn't break. You burned. You transformed. You rose. And now I stand outside the fire, watching you glow in a world I'll never reach. I'm leaving. I don't know where yet. I just know I can't stay in the place where I became that version of myself. I'm not asking you to care. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know, I see it now. Everything I did, everything I lost, and everything you've become. Your sister, Celia. I read the letter twice, then a third time. I didn't cry. I didn't feel rage or pity. I folded it carefully, placed it in a small wooden box I kept for relics of my old life, and went inside. That part of the story was done. Over the months that followed, I never heard from her again. No updates, no apologies, no second letters. It was better that way. Closure doesn't always come with a grand moment. Sometimes it's silence that heals the most. Luca and I built a home that smelled of fresh bread and laughter. We traveled. We danced in grocery store aisles. We had fights and made up and learned each other's soft spots like maps we'd trace with our fingers on long, slow Sundays. One night, under a stormy sky, he pulled me close after dinner and asked, "Do you think you'll ever talk to her? Again?" I thought about it, then shook my head. She had a chance to be part of this chapter. She chose another story. He nodded. He didn't push. A year later, I was pregnant. The first person I told was Luca, of course. The second was my mother. The third, myself. I stood in front of the mirror, holding the test in both hands, and whispered, "You made it. Not just the baby. Me. I had made it. Through grief, through betrayal, through reinvention. I had crossed the ocean of everything I thought would drown me and stood now on a shore made of light. When our daughter was born, I named her Elise. Not after anyone. Not after the past, but because the name meant pledge to God, and in some quiet part of me, I believed this child was a promise. That from pain could come purity. That from betrayal could bloom joy. That from a broken, silenced woman could rise a mother who would teach her child how to own every piece of herself, especially the ones shaped by fire. At night, when I rock Elise to sleep, I sometimes hum a lullaby Celia used to sing to me when we were little. The melody is soft and haunting, like a thread pulled from the fabric of memory. I don't hate her anymore. I don't love her either. What I feel is something quieter. Like standing at the edge of a cliff and knowing you won't fall again. I chose to make her my maid of honor, not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed her to stand at the altar of everything she'd destroyed and witness that I had rebuilt it without her, stronger, brighter, whole. And when I look at my husband, my child, my home, I know the best revenge is a life so full of love, the betrayal doesn't fit inside it anymore. And I won.